That was a good move because it was a jet. I had to interrupt, really cut off the first part of this video. I don't know how I'm going to blend them together. But I stopped my making my observations about the Murdaugh situation in South Carolina because it looked like a jet. I didn't see him taxi. All of a sudden, there he was at the top of the runway, and he had three really strong, high-intensity lights, spotlights. And these small airplanes typically don't. They might have one light, but not three. And the pilots use them even during the day. Although I don't know what good they're going to do when you're cannonballing down the runway at like 120 knots. You see the end of the runway. Here it comes. Here goes my Cessna. Back to the thing in South Carolina. This guy Alec Murdaugh. Danny Murdaugh was the guy that coached the Pirates in 1971 to a World Series victory over the Orioles. Fantastic coach. I wish he had coached for the Phillies instead of the losers that we had. Anyway, I was thinking about Alec Murdaugh. Oh, this guy Eddie Smith. This guy Alec Murdaugh. He doesn't care who he hurts. He's got a lot in common with Donald Trump. He'll trample on anybody to advance his cause. He'll throw anybody under the bus. He had the nerve to trash talk John McCain, a Vietnam veteran war hero, POW, tortured while he was caught. Medal of Honor, I think. But regardless, the trash talk. Trump was a draft dodger. There ain't no question about that. I don't blame any of those guys that dodged the military to get out of going to that war. I don't blame them. It was an evil and unethical, immoral thing to do, what we did in Vietnam. We should be apologizing to them. We should be giving them restitution. Think about that. They're on the other side of the planet. We had no dealings or interactions with them, and then there we go into that country with 500,000 men, 500,000 men. We dropped more tonnage of bombs in Vietnam than we did in World War II. Anyway, okay. That's Vietnam. So John McCain, was running for president in 2016, and Trump had the balls to say he didn't like him because he was caught. You dirtbag. You were such a coward and a chicken shit. You got your father to get you out of doing any military service. Which foot was it, Donald, that got you off the hook from the military? I don't know. Anyway, so I won't go there. I go crazy. South Carolina. Well, this guy and Trump have a lot in common. Anybody that stands in his way is eligible to be thrown under the bus. This guy Eddie Smith, man, he had nothing, basically. He's just trying to get by. Alec Murdaugh claims that he bought drugs from him, but then Alec Murdaugh set up this fake, contrived murder attempt on his life. It was a farce. It was all a fake. The day after he was fired, September 3rd, 2021 was a Friday. He's fired from the firm on that day. The next day is when he set up this fake, posed, manufactured murder attempt on his life, on his own life. Oh, some guy. I can give you a composite sketch. I didn't recognize him. Some guy came by. I was on the side of the road with a flat tire. This guy pulls over and shoots me. Lo and behold, they find a utility knife in the woods, like within throwing distance, with Murdaugh and Smith's DNA on there. And Smith is he's caught by one of those tentacles of the octopus. In the previous video I described Alec Murdaugh, the Murdaugh family, as an octopus, where he and the family itself are the head and the body of the octopus, and they have tentacles going out in all directions. And those tentacles are ensnaring other people and pulling them into their, into their cauldron of, I'm not going to call them evil, because Maddie, the mother, certainly wasn't evil. The son, Paul, that was murdered, he was a spoiled kid, and there are other people testifying as to how wonderful of a guy he was. But meanwhile, he gets drunk and runs a boat into a bridge and kills a girl. He killed this girl, not intentionally, irresponsibly, I guess. And he's 19 years old when that happens. I'll tell you what, man. There's some countries you do that and you're not culpable. There's no intention. I guess you don't call that a homicide. I'm not sure what the crime. It's a crime, and they got off somehow. He got off somehow. How did he get off? Well, could have something to do with the family's history and legal proceedings for 100 years. Okay, that notwithstanding, Alec Murdaugh is the focal point, and he is so much like Trump, man. Somebody will serve his purpose by their demise. He will make sure that they will experience that demise, regardless of who it is. His wife, his youngest son, who he murdered. I'm still trying to get that. When I look at him and I listen to him talk, I just think, is this a guy that's going to murder? Is this a double murderer that killed his wife and his son? Brutal and premeditated. It's all premeditated. He had it all planned out. Then there's the Satterberry case. There's something about his housekeeper's husband, whoever was, taking care of their house, her husband ended up. Oh, I know. Yeah, she slipped and badly injured herself in their house, and there was a settlement, the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Somehow Alec Murdaugh managed to pocket that money. Anyway, care about that. So, the question of law and the balance, the scales of justice really come into play here, because there are blind spots here, and he planned it so well. If he had just kept his mouth shut when his son, right before he murdered his son did a video of their dog down in the dog kennel on the property, and you could hear Alec Murdaugh's voice in the background saying something to the dog. He's not on camera, but it's his voice, and his voice was positively identified. Can you positively identify somebody by their voice? Yeah, I guess if you know them well enough, yeah. If you don't know him well enough, then no. So there's this blind spot there. So his son, right before he got murdered, they were in this thing. They had some dogs, and they had a little like some gated cages for dogs. They weren't mistreated or anything, but they like to go down, interact with the dogs at this place they call the kennel. So Paul, the son, Maddie, the mother. Or Maggie? Is it Maggie or Maddie? I think it might be Maggie. Maggie, the mother, and then Alec, the father. The three of them go down to the kennel. And Paul does this video. Visually, it's the dog, but in the background you can hear the voices of Paul, his mother, Maggie, and Alec, the murderer. Video ends. Alec murders his wife and his son, and then he leaves to create an alibi. And it would have held up if not for that video on Paul. And again, here's the blind spot. In the video, you only see the dog. You don't see the murderer, Alec. But you hear his voice, and you hear Paul's voice, and you hear Maddie's voice. Now, is that enough? You don't see the guy, you hear him. Bruno Hauptmann, the guy that was accused of killing the kidnapped Lindbergh baby back in the 30s, That's how they identified him, and he was railroaded. He was innocent. I don't think there's any question that he was innocent. No, but there was the evidence was weak at best, and some of it was planted by reporters. When they got into the scene of the crime where the kid was kidnapped, reporters planted evidence in there and then pointed to it, and the cops thought it was real. And that's one of the ways they got Bruno Hauptmann. So he was convicted and executed because people say, and he was German. People say that was the voice. They didn't know. They had no idea. And that was a good case where the identification of the voice identification, was mishandled and misguided, and really ended up sending an innocent man to his death. Recognition by voice. So, why didn't they pull that? I would have, if I was the defense, I would have referenced that case. People versus Hauptmann, and the evidence in that case, one of the strongest evidence contributions was somebody was supposed to bring the kidnapper money, and they heard the kidnapper's voice, and they identified that the voice of Bruno Hauptmann. They heard it one time, and they heard Bruno Hauptmann's voice one time, and they said they were the same. There's no way that should hold up. There's no way. Alec Murdaugh, these people all knew him for like 20, 30, 40 years. So when they heard his voice on that recording, they knew it was him. Not the same with Bruno Hauptmann. Still, I would have referenced that as a miscarriage of justice. If I was a defense for Murdaugh, I would have passionately presented that as an example of a miscarriage of justice and an execution based on voice identification. Okay. That's a blind spot. No blood. No blood on Murdaugh or on his face. He could have taken a shower. I don't know if he did, but he changed his clothes. He definitely changed his clothes. Is that incriminating? No. It sure fits nicely into what you might call something that looks planned out. It fits really nicely there. So with the tentacles, Eddie Smith, man, that guy's just getting screwed. That's a shame. Who knows? Maybe he'll get a book deal. I mean, if you look at this guy, he looks like a hobo. But I don't think he's on welfare. I don't know. All I know is that this guy Alec Murdaugh is just taking his life and throwing it down the garbage disposal to try to keep his own life together, and it didn't work. Alec Murdaugh is found guilty, and he's serving 2 consecutive life sentences, never to get out of jail ever. And then there's the girl that killed the son Paul that was murdered by Alec in a boat accident 2 years before. He was drunk and he ran into the boat into a bridge and killed this girl Mallory Beach. And there's a huge lawsuit involved in that, And I love the testimony of the attorney for the plaintiff in that lawsuit. Oh, shoot. Alex Tyler? What the hell's his name? South Carolina. He has a goatee. He had a great testimony. I couldn't stop listening to this guy. It was really a good testimony, because you got to understand his strategy for how he's going to go after the Murdaugh family as a result of the death of Mallory Beach. Man, did he know what he was doing too? Wow, you could just tell listening to him. I'm going to ramp up the pressure. He did a motion to compel. So he sues the Murdaugh family, for a lot of money, and then Alec Murdaugh comes to him and says, "Why don't you back off, man? I'm broke." Broke? You're broke? You got properties worth millions of dollars? You're telling me you're broke? So it doesn't work. And he tried intimidating this guy. Damn, Alex Tyler? Mark Tice? I can't remember his name. Damn it. Plaintiff for the Beach family, who lost Mallory Beach in a boating accident where Paul was the driver of the boat and he's drunk. So the tentacles reach out through Paul and into the Beach family, who lost their daughter. That's horrible, man. I mean, that's really horrible. And you just get this idea, and you get this image of this kid, Paul Murdaugh, like a spoiled, rotten kid. He's the youngest, you know, he's spoiled, rotten. I don't think he does any, he didn't work or have a job or anything, and he'd hang around. People say, oh, they love him, to have him hanging around. That's pretty sad. Okay, so the Beach family, Eddie Smith, all of the people, the attorneys, this guy, James Christopher Wilson, his testimony was heartbreaking, and you know, the relationship and the trust he had for his friend Alec Murdaugh is gone, and it's never existed for 40 years. I had something like that with somebody for 23 years, and suddenly it was gone, and then I realized it never really existed. So there's 23 years of your life involvement with somebody. With this guy, Wilson, it was like more than like 40 years. And man, he was taken for like 200 grand. Murdaugh got him for 200 G's. And in the end, he didn't care about that. It was just he was dealing with his emotions of pain, dealing with the reality that this person he thought he knew, he didn't know him at all. That happened to me recently. Somebody died, and then I realized after she died, I had no idea how deep the darkness went in her and in her family. God really can throw some curveballs at you, you know? It's bizarre. So anyway, with Murdaugh now, he's gone, but they're not done. There was some of the Sadaberry case, whatever that was, and then the Mack truck case. Mack truck case was good. Well, the Mack truck case is ultimately, I think, what they got him financially. He tried to pocket a lot of money, and of course, like 700 grand, 800 grand he tries to pocket. You don't think people are going to miss 800 grand? But remember, that 800,000 wasn't money that went to the plaintiff. And this is another case, okay? This is the Mack truck case where a drive shaft came loose on a Mack truck, and this drive shaft was bouncing around the interstate. And if you've ever held a drive shaft or seen one, or they're very heavy and very strong. And here's this thing bouncing around on the interstate. So Chris Wilson asked Alec to help him with the case because it was a big case. And so in the end, Wilson got 800 grand and Murdaugh got 800 grand. But all the money went to Wilson, and he had to disperse it to the firm where Murdaugh worked. And you don't write a check specifically to one person for this amount. It's an invitation for embezzlement, but he did. And Alec Murdaugh called Wilson and said, send me the 800 grand, but write the check out in my name. And the guy trusted him as friends forever. He said, okay, sends him the 800 grand. That money's gone. I don't know where. And there's a question going on. Well, where is all this money that he embezzled? Oh, I spent it on opioids. Get the hell out of here. You can go get fentanyl on the street corner in Phoenix or Los Angeles. You can get it for like $4 a pill. But he wasn't taking fentanyl. He was taking Oxycontin. That is like incredibly addictive too. And plus, you can't be stoned on Oxycontin and go and conduct yourself as a trial lawyer in a courtroom. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. You can't hide an opioid addiction for that long. Anyway, so the tentacles. Smith Beach, the lawyer Wilson, he really got hurt, and he got burned too for 200 grand. So that's 3. Sadaberry. There's something about the Sadaberry. Oh, and Eddie Smith is dead, and they exhumed him. The tentacles are reaching into the grave now. Okay, they exhumed him because they said that he died from blunt trauma or something like that, or a hit and run. I think it was a hit and run accident. They never got the driver, and they just said, okay, he's not a member of the Murdaugh family. Just sign off on it and bury him. And then all this other stuff starts coming out, and they're exhuming the body to open the investigation of how he was killed. So the tentacle of the Murdaugh family, octopus, reaches down into the grave and pulls this dead guy out of his grave to be re-examined. How's that for an image? So the grave, a quick review. Mallory Beach, God bless her, man. What a horrible, horrible thing. Mallory Beach, Eddie Smith, the attorney Chris Wilson. There's another attorney that was really hurt by all this too. One of the partners, and he testified. Anyway, I can't remember his name. Really good testimony there. I love listening to attorneys testify because, man, they know. They know. They know how to argue. They're very good at it. Some are. Sadberry. Oh, the housekeeper, her husband, he was killed somehow. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 deaths. You know, within a short period of time, no more than a year, all in the same, you know, reach of the octopus, of the tentacles of the octopus. It's cool, man. And I'm thinking of joining a group that wants to know more about this. I can find out anything I need, you know, by searching for it on YouTube or Google. So, getting involved in groups, it can be too much, you know. Just I don't need like an alarm going off on my phone every time somebody thinks they found out something new about the case in general. But there's a whole lot more to come, you know that. And this is more notorious and spectacular than the O.J. trial. And it mirrors, in my opinion, the tragedy that seemed to have a vice hold on the Kennedy family. And now this year, Robert Kennedy Jr. is saying he's going to run for president. I'd vote for him in a heartbeat, instantly. He believes in everything I do. Take care of the air and the water and the commons and the ground. All the natural resources have to be well taken care of and well maintained if we're going to survive as a species. Simple as that. And good environmental policy is also good economic policy. Sometimes, you know, businesses might need help complying with you know, environmental requirements and regulations, and that's where government should work with business. Make sure that you're working with a business that is morally and ethically good, and there's no corruption there. So we have Robert Kennedy. The tragedies in the Kennedy family. They were like, okay, so Joe killed in World War II on a suicide mission. Boy, that is as fucked up as I can imagine. Yeah, you're going to go on a suicide mission. Oh, me? Why don't you go on a suicide mission? And then when you get back, you can tell me all about it. Joe Kennedy Jr. is killed on a suicide mission in World War II. John Kennedy is assassinated in 1963. Robert Kennedy is assassinated in 1968. And then the Chappaquiddick thing with Ted Kennedy, so he's out. He's lucky to be elected dog catcher. And then Joe Kennedy Jr. Overdoses on drugs at 28 years old. So that's 5. Mary Kopechne at Chappaquiddick, 6 really. 6 deaths. Somebody else. Oh, the guy accused of rape down in Virginia, 7. I mean, it's just the tragedy and it's specific to the family. All these tragedies in South Carolina, they all go back to the head and the body of the octopus, the Murdaugh octopus. But they're selling that property, and I think that dynasty, wow, 100 years. The previous patriarchs, you know, there's Randolph, Murdaugh, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. They should go for the 4th and make it a complete circuit, you know, like a Grand Slam home run. There's a tinge of guilt inside of me by being so intrigued with this stuff, and I look at Alec Murdaugh like when in court, like his forehead comes out over his eyes, like Robert Lansing, the actor. Google him and click on images, and you'll see it's the same thing. Robert Lansing and Alec Murdaugh have these eyebrows that protrude. Their eyes are sunken back into their head, and they're whatever this bone is here, the forehead bone, this bone right here, where the eyebrows are, they protrude out. So it looks like he's got his, and whenever his eyes are shaded, but you can see him, and whenever they look, man, creepy. One friend of mine described him as creepy. That's not fair. You should never judge anybody on their appearances, ever. People can look intimidating and mean and ruthless, and then they turn out to be the sweetest, kindest person you ever met if you talk to them. And I got to tip my hat to Tim Draper about that. He's a billionaire venture capitalist. I love listening to him talk. And he says all these problems we have, interracial, ethnic, all this stuff, we can get rid of all of it. Everybody should just travel and experience other cultures. And when you do, you realize, oh, they're human beings like me, but they got other ways of doing things. They got other things. They get different ways of preparing food and different ways of living, and different beliefs, different religions. I totally cherish and value the diversity of religions. And, I know some fundamentalists that don't like that. That don't believe there's any other God or religion but theirs. But I'm an absolute believer in diversity. And Tim Draper is too. He says, you want to get rid of all these, resentment feelings, ethnic resentment feelings in your heart and all that. Travel. Experience the other cultures of the planet. My good friend Bruce Berman just got back from India and Nepal, and every time he goes on a trip like this, he comes back coughing and hacking and wheezing. God, I admire the guy. I really admire him because he's determined to go out and experience other cultures that are new and different and wondrous. I admire the guy for that. I wouldn't, only because I think it can be unhealthy. And I knew a guy that went to Mexico just as COVID was breaking out. He and his wife wanted to take a vacation to Mexico. Now, why anybody would vacation in Mexico with the absence of the rule of law? There's the rule of law there is that the old ancient rules of law: money rules, power rules, strength rules, the weak and the poor, and the helpless. They're screwed. That's Mexico, in my opinion. So this guy and his wife go to Mexico on vacation. They live in Denver. And they can't get the room that they ordered, so they were sent to an alternate room. Red flag number one. Okay. They had this reserved for a while, too, and they can't get the room that they're... So they go to another room. The room has mold. Long story short, the husband and wife come back early, and the husband is having all kinds of pulmonary problems with his lungs. And, thinking COVID. Hey, it's COVID, because it was 2020. It was like February of 2020. It was March. It all, hit the fan. He comes back, he's coughing and coughing. He goes to the hospital, he never comes out. He's gone. And it was a lung disease. Coincidence? I'm okay, I go to Mexico, I get sick, I come back and die. In Mexico. And that's not the only horror story I've heard about Mexico. You go to Mexico, you're going to be there for any length of time. You better not talk English, because they hear you talking English. Word gets around, you're a target for kidnapping. And that came from a couple of Mexicans that I heard on PBS. One was going to visit to see her husband down there, and the other one had a lot of experience traveling there. And she said, if you go to Mexico, you forget about English. You don't speak English there. It was Mexico City she was referring to. Anyway, that's all for now. Spring is coming on strong. We've got, let me think, 30, 40, about 45, 48 days to the summer solstice. And I'm glad when that happens, because that means we can move towards autumn and winter from that direction, and the days will get shorter. And I like that for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm always depressed, and I like it when the days are shorter and darker. Who knows? Anyway, peace out, y'all, and I hope your takeoffs are positive, and you have a positive rate of climb, and I hope your landings are all soft and firm and controlled. And Off you go into the wild blue yonder. Enjoy.